So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we're going to be doing another one of these real-life historical battles seen through the lens of 3rd Age. So it was very interesting to see the last one based on the Siege of Alessia, which I renamed as Aldburg, because I am of course trying to give a Middle-earth twist to some of these, even in the names. And this one is the Teutoburg Forest, where an alliance of Visigoths and Celts ambushes a Roman force which is using the road to get to a fort which is over here. And the Romans will be played by the Numenorians once again, Numenor, and the Celts will be played by the Rohirrim once again. However, now we have a new force on the field, the Visigoths, which will be represented by Rhudaur. So both Rohan and Rhudaur, of course, have got access to a lot of AP, which is going to be important because, once again, in terms of sheer quality, as you may expect, given the roles that these armies are taking up, Numenor have, of course, got the quality over their quarries this time around. But still, this one is still going to be somewhat of a siege, but again, it's going to be a siege in quite a different way to how we're normally used to it, because the first part of the battle will be an ambush along this road as the Roman armies try to link up with their forces in the fort way back over here. And it's going to be quite interesting, I think, to see how they get on within Teutoburg Forest itself, which I think I will probably rename in the name to be FANGORN Forest, because that seems to make a good deal of sense. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. So, for the attackers, I suppose you would call the Visigoths and the Celts on this occasion, obviously in the tree line over here, they have to attempt 2 ambushes on the road. One smaller one near the start and one larger one closer to the fortress. And it will be, they can achieve a minor victory by reducing the total Roman force by 55% during these ambushes. So they could achieve a minor victory before the actual siege of the fort at the end itself gets underway, because of course a major victory is if they not only successfully pull off their ambushes to good effect, but then when the relief forces come along, which they are not allowed to participate in the ambush, these ones back here, as soon as they are activated, and they're obviously going to be coming in to help siege the fort down, if they are also able to take the fort, then it's a major victory for the barbarians. As for the Romans, they can only achieve a major victory according to the rules. They have to sort of stave off the ambush and then go on to win the battle based on their defensive position within the fort. So fairly simple for Numenor, a little bit more nuance to how the victory will play out for the barbarians. But seeing as we're hovering over Numenor here, let's go ahead and go through their armies first of all. So we have Sin of the Dark Cloud playing as one. He's obviously very used to playing as Numenor, so he should feel right at home. Royal Legion of Armenelos, we have the Numenorian Shield Guard on both sides, nice AP spears, albeit AP is not going to be that useful against Rhudaur or Rohan, to be honest with you. More so against Rohan, I suppose, slightly. Numenorian cohort as well, Seafarers of Nindamos with their javelins, even though they do have an armor-piercing slant to them, the base damage of them is such that they're going to be good here, regardless. Belagair archers, I suppose Rhudaur, they're a little bit more capable of bringing high numbers of low-quality archers to skirmish. But considering the nature of this battle, considering it is an ambush, I imagine it's going to be in close quarters a little bit more, so a unit like this probably won't be as useful as it normally is for Numenor and Umbar. Temple Executioners, neither of the two attacking armies today is going to have anything quite on the level of this in close melee, especially with the armour upgrade. Narin Aru Royal Guard, who are good in melee, very resilient, even though again, not sure how useful, at least in the initial phases of the battle, archers like this are going to be. And Narin Aru Sentinels, of course, pikes, which Rhudaur may have some pikes, but Rohan most certainly will not. And there's some Numenorian Vanguard on both sides as well to help sweep through the trees, but controlling cavalry in trees is not all that easy, not because trees get in the way of them as such, the units will power through them just fine, but losing track of them is most certainly a thing that can happen, and they can end up getting pulled down, especially by stuff like heavy axemen, considering the calibre of opponents they're going to have to face off against. Marshal of the Guard, who is Spirit of Thunder, who's the creator of both this and the previous battle that was in this style. So big thank you to him for sending this to me, because these are very, very interesting. I'm interested to see how many of these he makes. Hopefully a lot. We have Royal Legion of Armenelos here at the front once again, Alcarondas Faithful and Pharazim Nobles on both sides, albeit one of them is actually from Lango's army. Numenorian Shield Guard, Numenorian Cohorts and Shield Guard, so a very similar setup to this army as well, with Seafarers and Archers and the like. More Seafarers, more Cohort, excuse me. He has the Pharazim Swordmasters, however, instead of the Temple Executioners, which is better, of course, because they have the additional hit point, which is all important, very, very powerful. Alcarondas Legion, which apparently are playing the part of the Praetorian Guard today, and it is quite interesting to note they do still have their Numenor colours in the files, which I think is pretty neat actually. So they're the Praetorian Guard. We have the Numenor Royal Guard of Sentinels and Cohort once again, and at the back here I imagine, yes, it's Lango's army, Numenorian Cohort, Numenor Royal Guard, Numenorian Shield Guard once again, so here at this little encampment on the path towards the settlement. Numenorian Cohort, Shield Guard, Cohort, yeah, pretty much what you'd expect. So a lot of Cohort, Seafarers, there's some Steel Bows as well, and then zipping across over to the fort, you can see Sin has got the rest of his army up here as well, Steel Bows, Seafarers, Numenorian Shield Guards. So once again there's going to be 3 armies of Numenor. A Duneheim Shadowbows Rangers in a situation like this where they can dig in can be extremely effective, of course. More Alcarondas Legion, more Alcarondas Legion, some Balagaya Pikes. These wagons look impressive, but unfortunately they don't actually function, at least to my knowledge. I don't think they've been fixed, where you could just sort of pass through them. You don't have to go through the gaps. Otherwise, circling the wagons like this would actually be kind of an interesting feature in a fort like this, but as it is, they're just going to be there for flavour, I think. Royal Legion of Armenelos, Temple Guard and Sentinel, so some elite units once again. And over here we have an artillery piece, the Trebuchet, as well as more Alcarondas Legion and more Shield Guard. So yeah, a good force within the fort as well, but they're definitely going to need reinforcements from the forces that are moving along the road if they are to survive against the 2 relief armies that are coming across from over there. I would expect them to win, honestly, because the 3 armies that are in the trees are probably not going to be as high quality as the Numenor host that's marching down the road. But having said that, it's not 3 full armies, because all 3 players have got stuff still within the fort, so it is going to be quite interesting to see how this plays out. We have Mevin, who's playing as one of the Visigoth armies, the Rhudaur forces. Franadine Berserkers are in here. We won't be able to see too many of the forces that are within the trees, obviously, because they're all going to be hiding, and Rhudaur don't need any help with that anyway, really, to be honest with you. They've got a lot of units that can hide just anywhere, let alone in trees like this, so very much at home in this kind of battle. The Franadine Berserkers, General's Bodyguard unit, they have those projectiles they can use, and they should be pretty good in melee against most of the forces they're facing off against as well. In these trees over here, we have Mevin, who is moving some of his units around, so we can actually see a couple of units of Rhudaur clansmen over here, and I think it's going to be a similar story here as we hack our way through the undergrowth over here. There is actually some terrain features in here as well, so you really do need to be careful with cavalry. You definitely need to keep a tight leash on them. Franadine Berserkers are here, so once again, obviously useful for the same sort of thing, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all we can see, but Inarius is over here, and then there's also another unit over here, Franadine Berserkers once again, Mr. Sneakman, going to be having an army that's very close in the first ambush. And then over here, so we have the 2 relief armies, one from Rhudaur, one from Rohan. We have, actually Mevin is over here with some of his units, so it's very much a mix and match sort of deal between all of the armies over here. Mr. Sneakman's got some Rhudaur swordsmen and Dunman pikemen, Franadine pikemen and Witchram enslavers, 2 units of Witchram enslavers actually, one from Mevin and one from Inarius, some Dunman pikes, some Rhudaur swordsmen, and then I think this is a full army from the Rohirrim over here, including some Eastmark axemen, who we saw in the last battle. They don't trade too well with Numenor, to be honest with you, but considering the numbers advantage they may have towards the late game, we'll have to wait and see. Riddermark spears, once again, you know, their spears are not going to be landing too many telling blows against higher tier Numenor units, but again, numbers are going to be the name of the game by the time this army comes into effect, I think. Westmark infantry and spears a little bit stronger. The Helm's Hammers are definitely something Numenor will want to be quite cautious of, because they've got massive shield value and of course those armour piercing attacks, as have the Westmark Marshals, albeit they're not quite as resilient. Some Westmark Spears, some Westmark Infantry, all the Westmarks just in behind the Eastmarks, and then some of the really strong stuff towards the back. Some Riddermark Axemen are over there as well. And then we have Chris, who's playing as another Rohan army. I nearly called it a Riddermark army then. Eastmark Axemen, Riddermark Axemen. So again, the AP is going to be really important. Everything else is just going to be there to sort of make up the numbers. Even the Westmark Infantry, as good as they are, they're not really on the same level as the equivalent Numenor units. So they're just going to be there for support. Medicelled Guard will be incredibly important for their javelins. Westmark Marshals and Westmark Infantry here also. So yeah, very much all of the attacking and defending armies are actually spread out all across the field, which I kind of like, because it means everyone gets a chance to engage in different phases of the battle, rather than just, if you're near the start, if you're the first ambushing army and it's your intent to effectively just blunt the enemy but die quite quickly, your battle can be over fairly fast. So I quite like the fact that everything is a little bit more nuanced than that. but I think I will actually make a bit of a cut, because I'm not sure actually when the ambush is allowed to begin as they march down this road. I think there is a point to when the ambush is actually allowed to get underway. So I'll make a little cut here, and we'll rejoin when the first of the barbarian hordes is breaking from the tree line. So I believe we're going to be getting underway now, and it's a good thing I did make a cut, because it was a very stop-start sort of advance that the Numenorians had going on as they passed through the forest, but now you can see that Mr. Sneakman is going to be breaking from the tree line. Rhudaur Axemen going first, actually. They're impetuous as well. Arrows coming forth from the tree line as well. Numenorian Vanguard having to go uphill there. Very difficult for them to actually get into a position where they can charge, and they didn't really all that well. This unit will do a little bit better in those terms. The Rhudaur Axemen are here. You can see they're actually being run right through by this Numenorian Vanguard, so only one unit has broken from the trees so far. And they are being handily attacked. Dunman Outriders charging into the Belagire Archers and into the Numenorian cohort. They are going to break pretty quickly though. Obviously Dunman Outrunners not quite up to the same standard as something like the Numenorian Vanguard, but the Numenorian Vanguard were shaken for a little while there, and they do need to be careful, because obviously keeping track of cavalry in and amongst these tree lines over here is going to be quite difficult. And this is the problem, like, I'm not sure if Sin would have chosen to do that. I mean, yes, trying to shut down the javelins is important, but Attenmore's Troll Hunters are going to be able to deal a pretty hefty amount of damage. And you can also see now from the other side as well, some Rhudaur Axemen are breaking from the trees, as are some Blackwolds. The Blackwolds are actually struggling a little bit, but I would imagine that's because they're being shot up by different sources of archer. You can see there some Rhudaur clansmen also doing their best here to hunt down some Alcarondas faithful, or at least try and bog them down. You can actually see some of the Romans are now heading into the tree line to try and meet the ambush head on, and the Numenorian cohort is doing very, very well. Now this initial ambush I wouldn't expect to do all that impressively, because it is a smaller scale one. Having said that, given the nature of how the Romans had to set up, given the fact that there are axe throwers and heavy axemen in here, I would still imagine they can do a bit of damage. But it's going to be the second ambush, I think, which is going to be the all-telling moment in this battle, where we really start to see which way the winds are blowing. You can see their arrows flying forth from the Numenorians, trying to do their thing. A lot of these units back down here are still just trying to hold their position, trying to use their arrows. There you can see, very important there for the javelins to get into a good position to fire, because you can see they're doing a huge amount of damage actually to the Narinaru Sentinels. So I think this is how, certainly Rhudaur can make this work for them early on in this battle. They can pick and choose their targets well. They can get rid of some of the more elite units. You can see over here, some of the Rohirrim are broken from the trees as well, some Eastmark Axemen, but they're getting charged in the back by Numenorian Vanguard, and from the front they're having to deal with Numenorian cohorts as well. Shieldmanes of Rohan are up there in the tree line. So again, those axe throwers firing into the front of heavily armoured and shielded units. They're not going to do as much damage as they otherwise would. They're still going to do a decent amount of damage here, and you can see they are actually shaking, the Numenorians. They're getting hit by javelins as well. So the Rohirrim here doing a large amount of damage to the Numenorians, and this is a lot of damage. Numenor are going to have to try and stave off this assault for a little bit longer in melee. Of course, eventually this ambush will start to lose steam, especially as more of the back ranks of the Romans start to push their way forwards into this frontal area where Sin of the Dark Cloud was, of course, on point. Pushing through the forest, you can see here a large amount of casualties for the Rhudaur swordsmen, as you would expect. They're not really up to the same sort of level as some of the units they're facing off against here. Some Roman javelins moving in as well. The Alcarondas Legion closing down the Ettenmore's Troll Hunters in melee. And this, I think, is going to be the end of these portions. The Ferojum javelins, their javelins are pretty nasty. They're also pretty strong in melee, to be honest with you. They're the sort of unit which can do a decent amount of damage to something like Numenorian cohort. But they're also having to deal with the Royal Legion of Armenelos, which again, the AP is useful when they're isolated like that. Cut away from their support is going to be difficult for them. This section of the ambush is, of course, starting to fall apart first, but it's the front of the column where the ambushers are doing their best work. So if they can just hold back the reinforcements from pushing through the trees, they should be onto a winner here. There are some units down here as well. Numenorian cohort pushing into the trees, forcing the Trollshore axe throwers to rout. And once again, you can see over here the Rohirrim trying to get their ranged units into a position where they can fire. The ambush is now starting to fall apart, to be fair. The Shieldmanes of Rohan, I think they're trying to scurry away into the trees once again. That's not going to work though, because there's cavalry around. They're going to get caught. Rhudaur clansmen, Rhudaur clansmen are close by, which could make a bit of a difference. They are spears after all, but with the Numenor infantry on the way forward. To be fair for Numenor, that looked like it was going fairly badly at one point. And there are a fair few Numenor casualties down here, which of course will come into play later on. But I think they can afford to be fairly pleased with this. It's the next ambush where they need to be ready to take some more casualties, and they need to try and win that battle as well. They need to try and win the next ambush, because if they don't, they're going to have no reinforcements left to deal with the relief force besieging the fort. The Blackwolds obviously holding on a Berserker class unit, so their morale will remain as it is. A combination of Rhudaur clansmen and shield maidens, albeit the shield maidens are a little bit depleted at this point. And up against this quality of unit, they're really going to struggle, to be honest with you. A little bit further back here, there's still some Eastmark spearmen over here, still with some ammunition as well, so I mean, if they can throw some javelins into the back of that force over there, that would be quite useful, and I think that's exactly what Chris is going to try and do. Indeed it is. Any volley they can get like that is going to be very, very nice, because it will allow them to just chip away at that Numenor manpower. They didn't kill off as many as obviously it initially looked like, but still, that still would have got some kills on some pretty impressive units. Narana Royal Guard firing into the tree line at what, I wonder? Nothing by the looks of things. Again, it's very difficult to keep track of some of the units that are actually firing. So you can see here, back here was the Rhudaur firing line, but they of course have been closed down by elite tier infantry and cavalry since then. So they're not really going to get much in the way of killing done now, but they would have been able to earlier on. And those Rhudaur archers of course have got a lot of ammo, so unlikely to go away unless you make them. Now the Eastmark spearmen have been engaged, so they won't be able to continue throwing their javelin volleys now. And they're obviously not going to do too well in melee against a spear which is of substantially higher quality than themselves. Over here, I think this is all the routing units coming from the back edge of the tree line over here. There's a lot of red arrows heading towards the edge of the map. We can sort of say that maybe they've rejoined up with the relief force, but obviously in terms of sheer numbers they won't. That'll just be for flavour. As we move back down over here past the dead trees, you can see actually the shield maidens of Rohan getting into a position once again to fire. They may be depleted, but again, every volley of these throwing axes they utilise, a few more Numenorians are going to die. And that's the key here. Like, they were never going to win the battle based on this first ambush, but the more damage they can do, the better it's going to be for them. I'm not sure I would have gone after the Royal Legion with them though, because you're really unlikely to get kills with axe throwers on the Royal Legion from the front. You'd be more likely to get a couple on the Numenorian cohort. There go some of the riders, the Alcarondas faithful. I'm surprised actually the Rhudaur clansmen are still holding on, but they are wavering, so that probably won't last for too much longer, to be honest with you. And there goes a rear charge from the Alcarondas faithful. Shield maidens of Rohan routing. It takes a little bit to actually do that. The shield maidens have got some good morale, and they have a morale buffing effect as well, but obviously in a hopeless fight like that, when they're getting hammer and anviled, there's no hope for them. And as if on cue, a rather large unit of Eastmark spearmen routes off, but again, not the worst thing, because they wouldn't have gotten that many more kills anyway, even if they were fighting. I mean, they are fighting to the death, but when a unit is broken and fighting to the death, their stats, I think, are like, literally 0 across the board. So their chances of actually killing anything are extremely minor. There they go. So I think that's pretty much it from this first ambush, indeed it is. And now we will be able to take stock as the Romans come back out from the tree line. We will be able to see how much they have left. And obviously they still have a good amount of their force intact, but that is quite necessary for them. Like I said, a bigger ambush awaits, and they do need at least some of these reinforcements to get to the fort at the end. Otherwise, like I said, that relief force is fairly sizable, while the quality of Numenor is obviously still going to be sufficient to defeat them in those terms. In terms of the numbers, they will struggle if they aren't able to get at least a decent sized force down the road and into the fort, I think. But Lango's force, obviously at the back, he will have taken the least amount of losses, because back here it was more of sort of a delaying measure back here. Obviously, a lot of you can see over here. There's a lot of these Eastmark units dead on the ground, more so than Numenorians. There are a few Numenorians scattered throughout the place, a few shield maidens here and there. A larger engagement over here happening with Axemen. Once again, you can see primarily barbarian forces here. As we get further along the road, however, you can see more and more Numenor forces start to get mixed in, because it was further towards the front where more of the emphasis was for the ambush. And certainly I think you can see from the fact that a lot of Sin of the Dark Clouds units are depleted now, he definitely bore the brunt of that. Although some of his elite units are still there just fine. Stuff like the Royal Legion obviously will take a little bit more of a beating than anything else. There's still some cavalry moving around as well, stuff like the Alcarondas faithful. I don't know where the Pharazim nobles got to. But having that cavalry is going to be important, because they used it well. Keeping track of cavalry in those trees is going to be quite difficult. You can tell from the fact that Sin crashed into those heavy spearmen that it can be quite hard to tell where you're going. with some cavalry, but they used it to pretty good effect, I would say. They definitely shut down some important targets. If they didn't do that, then it would have taken slightly more losses, which obviously wouldn't have been ideal for them. The unit of Royal Legion of Armenelos, so again, good quality elite units that are still alive. I would imagine they would still be alive by the time they get to the fort. It's going to be more the numbers around them that I think is going to be the question mark here. Will they be able to withstand a larger ambush? Potentially a more all-encompassing ambush as well, as they get themselves back into formation. There are the Barrows of Nobles, 23 of them still alive, still some Numenorian steel bows, so I believe, yes indeed, they do still have their ammunition. So again, AP arrows, very important. If they see a target coming out at them from the tree line, which they really want to target down, something like the Medicel Guard, for example, they will be ideally placed to do so. Again, just combing through the trees with their cavalry, making sure there's no surprises left for them, although of course we know there are a few surprises left for them. Over here in these trees over here. What are these units that can't hide? Because they're in the trees. There they are. It's Rhudaur Clansmen. I guess this is just a patch of trees where units can't hide. I guess that's what's going on here, which is a little bit strange. Obviously this is also very close to the fort as well, so it will be quite interesting to see if Numenor can push through and just get to the fort through the ambush. Of course that means they could leave some of the ambush troops behind to then help siege the fort, but it could be an option for them if they decide to play it like that way. It's a little bit risky for my liking, and I imagine they're just going to try and hold their ground against the ambush with their quality, more so than try and do that. But now the Romans have formed up once again. I think I will make a little bit of a cut here because the marching along the road was very stop-start just to get to that point, and I imagine it's going to be much the same thing here. So there will be another little cut here as we move towards the second ambush, and then I imagine the battle will be a straight shot to the finish when the relief forces arrive to try and take the fort. So I'm going to rejoin here because I do think the ambush will be getting underway relatively soon. You can see some of the units actually that are really nearby the road have already been uncovered, but of course for the sake of fairness, they're not going to charge into the trees to deal with them. But Eastmark spearmen will be ready to let loose a volley or two of their javelins before they're inevitably closed down in melee, of course. Very depleted Naranaru sentinels there. Definitely one of the victims of the last ambush as the javelins started to come in. Obviously this is a glitch which happens on any map with this many trees. Sometimes patches of them do vanish from plain sight. Royal Legion of Armenelos in the vanguard now, which is a good choice to have on the front line. I mean, yes, they will be susceptible to the AP attacks of the enemies, but here we go. We can see now the forces are going to be breaking from the trees. Huge amount of red arrows appearing from thin air. And this is going to be a more substantial ambush on both sides as well. On the last ambush, it was mainly from this side we saw it, but you can see now there's a lot more happening over on this side of things. And we can see Dunman spearmen are moving forward. To be a little bit careful here, actually, the Alcarondas faithful. They don't want to be charged in on by any units if they can help it. They definitely want to keep moving. In come the Rhudaur Axemen. Definitely going to be a useful unit, especially if they can be supported, because as they charge in here, they're going to be able to unleash their armour-piercing attacks onto these heavily armoured units from Numenor. Dunman spearmen slightly lesser, of course, but they're going to be here for numbers. Again, numbers from this ambush is going to be more substantial. But that is really, really dreadful, actually, from those Rhudaur Axemen. Routing with 178 men in the unit. I mean, that does speak of how this ambush was just executed. You could say that they shouldn't have been sent in all on their lonesome back here, but that's really poor morale. You expect a little bit better from Rhudaur, especially considering that their morale is supposed to be a little bit better than the standard evil men. I know they're charging into Numenorian cohort with support around them, but they touched the enemy and then routed off immediately. That's so disappointing. And this might be something which colours the battle as a whole as well, and I hope that that doesn't have too much of an impact on this ambush over here. There's still a lot of red painting over all of this, so you would hope that the Romans don't have too significant a victory in this ambush, to be honest with you. Otherwise, I would call into question the relative balance of this scenario, because there's so many elites here for Numenor, and it's hard to make an impression on that with just basic stuff. Even in an ambush like this, you're relying on stuff like your javelins, which, considering most of them are Eastmark spearmen as well, like relying on that to do the damage for you is fairly iffy, if I'm being honest. Dunman spearmen, you can see their axe throwers coming in. Blackwold should be able to make more of an impression. I would hope at the very least that Sin's army at the front doesn't survive this ambush. because if all three of these armies manage to make it in reasonably good condition to the fort, it's not going to be all that much of a question who goes on to win this. Coldfell Maidens firing away, Ferodrum Javelins firing away as well. Hopefully those larger units of Rhudaur Axemen do return at the very least. Rhudaur Swordsmen pulling back a little bit. These Rhudaur Axemen are broken and fighting to the death. Yeah, you can see here, this is the problem when so many elite units are attacking all at once. The morale effect it has on basic enemy units is devastating, and there's so many Royal Legion of Armenelos units, so many multiple HP heavy swordsman units in this force. Dunman Spearmen are shaken. I mean, even over here where they've got stuff like Westmark Marshals on the front line, Javelins coming in, here comes some Pyranodyne Berserkers as well. They need to get themselves onto the front line sooner rather than later. Axe throwers are going after the Pharazim Swordmasters. Killing them off is going to take a little bit of time, however. I mean, they are having an impression. Several units are trying to focus them down now, and actually, ironically, now that their own infantry are out of the way, there goes Marshal of the Guards General. Now that their own infantry are out of the way, they've got far more of a free shot on their range units, which, like I said, that's how they're going to win or lose this. And yeah, this ambush is going decently for the ambushers. Just a bizarre how those like almost full strength Rhudaur Axemen units routed almost immediately. And I can only assume it's because of the elite units that are nearby. I mean, some of them probably cause fear. Rhudaur clansmen getting broken up. And once again, Lango's force will be the one that weathers this storm the best, because I imagine over here it's just a sort of stalling measure so he can't move into the forest and try and work up the lines. Ferodrum Javelins, again, using those big clubs. I would imagine they would actually be able to defeat Numenor in Shield Guard and melee, so I'm not sure why it looks like they're not going to be able to. Blackwold's up here, again using their big stone axes. At least it looks like stone. I've always thought that was kind of a cool concept for these savages. Against the Numenorian cohort, there goes some more Rhudaur swordsmen. Moving in, you can see the Temple Executioners are still down here. Royal Legion of Armenelos is still there. Ferodrum Javelins charging through. Over here, it is at the front of the column, to be fair, where the ambush is having its greatest impact. What have we got over here? Some Dunman Pikemen which haven't been committed yet. They need to be committed somewhere, to be honest with you. Otherwise they're just going to get charged into the side or something, and then they'll be next to useless, especially against the level of forces they're having to deal with here. Ferodrum Javelins now on the road, trying to charge into the rear of these Balagai archers. I mean, they will be getting in the way somewhat of the Temple Executioners, relieving the beleaguered front of the Numenorians. These Westmark Marshals have definitely had an impact there, you can tell, alongside these decently defensive Rhudaur clansmen. They're definitely starting to wear down this front line. In come the Shield Maidens, out of ammunition I would assume, trying to get in here, supporting the Rhudaur swordsmen. So again, from a numbers perspective, things are going quite well at the front here, but Temple Executioners arriving on the scene now is going to make life a little bit more complicated, as are the Royal Legion of Armenelos. Charging into the side here of these Blackwolds. It's definitely been a bloody affair here at the front of the column. The further back you go, of course, the more dominant Rhudaur become, although these Coldfell Maidens making a bit of a nuisance of themselves, but it's hard to go after targets like Numenor. Have got so many pole arms that they've got at their disposal. They've got spears, I should say. They've got Narin Iroh Guard, they've got Shield Guard in most places along their formation. And actually some more Coldfell Maidens breaking from cover, going after some Balagai archers. What have we got back here? Seafarers of Niindamos. Some more Rhudaur clansmen coming in, some Dunman pikemen trying to block the way as well. So Lango is trying to work up the lines. A lot of his units at this point are very tired. Fatigue could come into it as well. These units may not be as fresh as they were at the start of the battle. Just getting in the way, these Rhudaur clansmen trying to buy more time, of course, for the forces at the front. Coldfell Maidens trying to recycle themselves. Dunman Spearmen are routing. In come some Riddermark archers. They've used up all their ammunition at this point, so they're going to charge into melee as well. Very limited utility in melee, of course, but they could be committed over here to try and shore up these swordsmen. Rhudaur clansmen starting to lose over here on this side now that more of the elites have made their way from the centre of the column to the sides. You can see that they are having the desired effect for Numenor as the Blackwolds do their thing. Interesting to see what this is like. I mean, you can see here that the Romans are only 4% away from having a minor defeat inflicted upon them. And I think I mean, they don't have any ranged units anymore, Rhudaur, I think, with any ammunition left, which may prove to be a bit of an issue. They're going to have to go through 4% still of the Numenor army. In come the Westmark Marshals, though. They're going to be able to finish off some of those elites there, which is an important thing. Rhudaur archers from further in the tree line as well, moving forward, so more numbers in there. Coalfell Maidens doing their thing. I don't know if they have enough left in them to kill off a whole 4%, to be honest with you, in sheer melee. It's going to be down to units like the Westmark Marshals, I think, to be able to do that. Dunman Pikemen doing their best to fight on the front line. Defeat is a distinct possibility, though. I think it's clear that at this point, Numenor, they are going to be able to get some units to the fort, which is good. Obviously, if they didn't, then they would have been in massive trouble. But will they be able to avoid giving the Barbarian Alliance their minor victory condition? That much is a little bit more in question. It's going to be very close, though, because I think certainly now Numenor are really gaining the upper hand. Dunman Pikemen are obviously doing their best to hold on from the front here, but while Pikes are capable of punching well above their weight, when they're being pushed in on like that, especially a basic Pike, they're going to struggle a bit more. Coalfell Maiden's broken and fighting to the death, trying to get into the rear lines, but ultimately Narinari Royal Guard dealing with them. Still a few units from the Barbarians down here, and the Blackwolds will fight to the bitter end. There's some others in the trees back over here as well, albeit Trollshaw Axe Throwers, who in melee, again, their abilities are questionable, especially against Numenorian cohort. But every little helps. In come the Blackwolds, and they will be able to do some decent damage to Seafarers, and killing off some more of them could be the difference between that victory condition and none at all. And again, now you can see the Westmark Marshals are on the front line. There's not many of them left now, though, 21. Some of the Rhudaur Axemen did return, though, so 170 Rhudaur Axemen on the front line. Is that going to be enough to tip the scales in their balance as well? We'll have a look when the Barbarians have been thrown off. There is actually a few more throwing axes coming forward from the trees over there. Again, it could be the difference of a few kills as to whether this ambush can be labelled success according to the victory conditions or not. Any more of those, though, and I think it may very well be. Yeah, some Trollshaw Axes. If they got into a position where they had a slightly better angle. Yeah, now you can see Westmark Marshals are breaking off. Considering this is a unit which has already broken once, I imagine these Rhudaur Axemen are probably not going to stick around for too much longer, to be honest with you. I've always rather liked the Rhudaur aesthetic. Again, in terms of colour palettes, obviously they're not the most flamboyant, with brown being their primary colour, but I kind of like the armour style of them. Like the plates. Again, it's obviously very much cobbled together, but that's what you would expect from a faction like them. There's still Rhudaur swordsmen fighting on the front line, and they are still digging in here, Rhudaur. Rohan at this point don't have anything left, I don't think. Yeah, the Rhudaur archers just left the front line. What was left of them also fled the scene. A few archers doing their thing. There's actually still some fighting happening deeper in the trees as well, with Rhudaur Berserkers as well. 76 Rhudaur Berserkers. I mean, they're being overwhelmed, but they should be able to get a few kills for their trouble while they're in here. Well, I'm not quite so sure about that. I think Inarius is trying to pull them back into the trees, maybe trying to get them to link up with the relief force. Numenorian Steel Bows also in melee against some Ettenmore's Troll Hunters. Not a bad unit to have either. They're not the most damaging in melee, but they are quite resilient. So they will hold on for just a little bit longer. And that might be the difference here. Still some archers further back here. Yeah, these Rhudaur Axemen are running away now. I think these the Trollshaws are going to try and get back to the relief force as well. I don't know how much ammunition they have, but saving any unit you can is probably going to be a good idea. Yeah, Rhudaur Rangers, they need to be saved. They're going to get picked apart. I'm actually a little bit surprised I didn't see them get used a little bit more comprehensively in that little ambush there. Still a few units fighting in the trees. I imagine it's still the Ettenmore's Troll Hunters who are, I think, at this stage trying to run. Indeed they are, but the Numenorian cohort is getting in the way of them. I don't know if this was intentional or not, considering the thick nature of the undergrowth we're in here. But if it was, well played, because it means they may be able to stop these Ettenmore's Troll Hunters from getting back to the force, and that's a whole unit they won't have to deal with when the fort comes under attack. Which again, could be the difference between victory and defeat. Oh, my allergies. Numenorian steel bows. Victory seems certain. Yeah, they're not going to be able to get away here, the Atmor's Troll Hunters. They're just going to have to stand and fight. Hope to get a couple more kills. Steel bows and cohort blocking their retreat. They're shaken. I'm surprised, honestly, they're not looking like routing a little bit faster, to be honest with you. By Rhudaur standards, they're heavily armoured. Although I'm sure Numenor would laugh at what they call armour. Here comes some Rhudaur axemen as well, trying to just do something to help them out. A charge from those heavy axemen. Again, AP. Another kill. It's not a complete waste, although of course this does mean that this unit of Rhudaur axemen is almost certainly going to be defeated as well. And speaking of which, you can see the first of the Romans that were marching down the road are going to be able to make it to the fort, which I think is probably going to be the signal, yes indeed, for the relief force to start marching towards the fort. And this is going to be the angle that they're going to have to attack it from. Now, of course, the red line is over here, so of course, in reality, what they could do is just sort of mosey around the fort, but we're going to ignore that. We're going to assume that the Romans have been a little bit more comprehensive than that, just because the red line obviously makes that an impossibility. But yes, what do we have over here? Still fighting in the trees, apparently. Actually, apparently not. Atmor's Troll Hunters actually survive, so they haven't been killed off entirely. And there's still a few battles going on. I'd back the Shield Guard in this particular duel because they have AP and better stats in melee overall, but you never know. Well, I guess you do know. There he goes. Uppercutted and then skewered. So let's have a look. I mean, yeah, like that ambush, like minor victory condition achieved for the barbarians. So even if they go on to fail to take the fort, they can take solace in the fact that they have achieved one of their goals. But the question is, can they now go on to win the battle? I somewhat doubt it, to be honest with you. I think Numenor have managed to preserve enough of their forces moving down this road to the point where I don't think the relief force is going to be substantial enough to come in and take the fort. We'll go up to ×2 speed because obviously it's going to take a little while for all of the armies to get into position. Obviously there's rangers on the defence as well, which is going to be a real concern for the attackers. These choke points, very narrow. Artillery is also present. I mean, there's only two ways into the fort that I can see. There's this one, and there's the main area over here. I mean, I guess as well they could try and go up and around over here across this bridge. It is an option, but like I said, bridges are kind of a pain, to be honest with you. I mean, they could try it, and they may have to, the barbarians here, because they need to pressurise more than just two nicely defensible choke points, especially given the presence of rangers, the elite units that the Romans still have at their disposal. Going to be very difficult to deal with, I feel. But we shall see. Again, Rohan moving forward. There's obviously the Rhudaur forces with them, but it's primarily Rohan, I think, at this point, to be honest with you. Primarily Rohan force, which, I mean, again, means they're going to be at the mercy of pikes for the most part, I think. But with units like Westmark Marshals and Medicel's Guard, they're arguably better suited to do damage, given that I imagine most of the Rhudaur javelins and axe throwers were used in the ambushes. Granadine pikemen, though. So some key units from Rhudaur here, which will be very, very useful, including the Enslavers, of course. There is no more damaging a unit that these two can commit to the battlefield in an armor-piercing sense. Even the Helm's Hammers, like, they're a little bit better at keeping themselves alive, of course, because of those massive shields they wield. It looks like some of the Romans are actually going to try and come out here and defend this little pass as well. Will be quite interesting to see. I mean, we'll go down to 1 speed now, I think, given the fact that we're going to start to see some trading of fire between the archers. And there you can see some Belagair archers firing away. Certainly in a skirmish fight, Belagair archers are going to be far stronger than Riddermark archers, which this is one of the problems the attackers have at this point. Like, Rohan and Rhudaur are not the sort of factions which are going to do well if they sit back against Numenor. But if they commit themselves in, they're going to put themselves at the mercy of being in close quarters with some of the stronger units that Numenor can field, as well as, you know, obviously the rangers and the artillery. But Me personally, I would probably try and collapse on them with as much strength as I could all at once, because that's the way you're most likely to maybe push through a choke point, start spreading in, and I think that's probably their best chance. Ultimately, though, I do think they are going to struggle, I think, because they are down on percentages anyway, and I think they're down on quality as well, so based on that, just to try and give it as good a go as you can, I think just going in with as much strength as you can all at once is probably the way to go. Rhudaur spears, obviously Westmark and Eastmark units, nothing they have is going to be of the level. I mean, they do outnumber the Numenorians still, like that's just a percentage of their total forces, which means obviously Numenor still have less overall, but again, in quality terms, it definitely evens itself out, I would suggest. Rhudaur archers trying to fire in, but again, like the damage they're going to be able to do to Balagar archers is relatively limited anyway. Nara and Ara Royal Guard even more so because of the even heavier armour and shields that they are rolling with. Trebuchet getting into position as well. Be interesting to see where they put the Trebuchet, because I would probably put it behind one of the choke points, to be honest with you, because that's where the blobs are likely to form. If they put it up onto the walls, that would be all the excuse I would need to come forward really, really quickly and try and do damage. As the Rohirrim try to move around, they could be trying to get across the bridges, to be honest with you, but of course all it's going to take is a couple of units of infantry to block off a very narrow choke point. Alcarondas Legion will do the trick. With a bit of backup, I would suggest as well, they would be just fine. They may struggle a little bit against stuff like Westmark Marshals, but that's what your archers are for in this situation. What have we here? Balagar archers, they're eager but tired. Eastmark Axemen are moving forward. Are they just trying to come forward as a sort of barrier for the arrows? I mean, they do have a shield at the very least, but I mean, you need all the infantry you can get at this point. I hope they're not thinking of sending in just one unit of Eastmark Axemen and hoping that will be sufficient, because it won't be. It won't be sufficient to achieve anything whatsoever. They'll just be sent in, maybe get 1 or 2 kills before getting slaughtered or routed. So I do hope that's not Chris's plan. Meanwhile, Westmark Spearmen again, they're taking the long approach. I mean, they have 3 avenues of attack that they can use. And they need to come down like a ton of bricks on all 3 of them. Definitely the 2 choke points on the lower ground, because you're not subjecting yourself to the unfavourable nature of having to go across a bridge, but they need to pressurise all 3, I think, to get anything out of this battle. And they may be able to overwhelm with numbers and then utilise some of their quality units. Medicel Guard getting into a good position to rain their javelins down upon the enemy could be very significant, as of course could getting key units into melee like the Helm's Hammers, Westmark Marshals and Witchrealm Enslavers. So a little bit of a strange one. They're just coming forward with a single unit of infantry, as if Numenor were going to leave the fortress anyway, and even if they did, 1 unit of Eastmark Axemen is probably not going to be enough to stop their progress for that long. But there they stand anyway. Nara and Ara Royal Guard still firing away. They still have ammunition, the Rhudaur? They do by the looks of things. They've still got their short bows out. What are they actually going to fire at though? Nothing by the looks of things. So again, a bit of a lull in proceedings. We'll go up to ×2 speed once again. Again, this often can happen in battles like this, where they want to get into the ideal position before they move in. Although I don't know if the ideal position is going to make all that much of a difference here at Nordström. As you can see here, what would have been a sort of makeshift defence over here on the front, they have fallen back to the more sturdy walls of the fort. So yeah, Rhudaur Spearmen probably going to move across. Rhudaur Spears are not going to be able to do all that much to Alcarondas Legion, to be honest with you. Maybe put them into shield wall with the backup of a heavy Axeman unit, and then try and push through. That might be the answer in a situation like this. I'm not sure. But when they attack, they need to attack with everything, because if they try and dribble their way in 1 unit at a time, it's going to go horribly wrong for them very quickly against this level of quality that Numenor have. It's an uphill struggle for them already, given the defensive position that Numenor occupy, given the units they still have at their disposal. But if you're going to go down, don't go down with a whimper. Don't go down not wanting to commit your units to a fight, because by the time you have to, they'll end up getting embarrassed, and so will you. Still steel bows up on the wall, they can pick and choose their targets. Of course, they're going to ravage something on the approach. Rhudaur Berserkers moving in the trees back there wouldn't be a bad place to start. Here are the Eastmark Axemen. So they're still just manoeuvring around. They're going to have to attack at some stage. When they do, remains to be seen. Rhudaur Axemen moving forward. Maybe they feel a little bit safer now that some of the ammunition of the defenders has been expended. So stuff like the Rhudaur Axemen, which they really can't afford to get shot up on the approach. That AP is going to be absolutely invaluable. Steel bows firing? No. No, an Royal Guard firing? No. A D9 Shadow Bows are just going to wait until Rohan blob up. No, an Royal Guard firing into the sides of the Medicel Guard there, who are actually pushing in, so we will go down to 1 speed now. Medicel Guard are going to try and fire their javelins into this V formation. Not the worst idea. Again, they're so tightly packed, but they're just sort of stood there and not firing their javelins, which can be an issue in a situation like this. Like if they're going to be moved forward, like you need to use their ammunition now. Otherwise, they've just been moved forward to die. And this is part of the reason why I get so frustrated with players that are overcautious, because when they do commit forward, even though they've got so little to concentrate on, they still make basic errors. I don't know who Chris is. Is that blindness? Is it blindness? If it is, he should know way better than that. Once you're in, you're in. Even if you change your mind, it's too late. You've got to commit to what you chose to do. And now he's going to run. He's going to turn his back on the archers, which of course is going to inflict more damage on them. Needless casualties. Medicel Guard, one of the most important units you still have. One of your only hopes of winning the battle, in my opinion. Being mismanaged already. And still they're just sort of creeping forward. Like, this is the problem, like the Numenorians are not going anywhere. You're not going to be able to bait them into making horrendous errors by sort of slowly creeping your way forwards in loose formation, getting your units near to the walls. Like, as soon as you commit one of your elites forward, the steel bows are going to open up on them. As soon as you start moving forward with one of your elites, the rangers or the trebuchet, it's going to get into position, it's going to do damage to you, it's going to hurt. But there's no avoiding it. Like, waiting for this amount of time is not achieving anything at all. We're going up to ×2 speed. Helm's Hammers are back over there. So again, they've shuffled their way around, they've shuffled the deck a little bit, but ultimately their units are just in a different position. No closer to the fort, really. And it's going to be all too easy for Numenor to just pick and choose their targets still. Now the Medicel Guard are getting into position, now they're going to fire by the looks of things. Yes, they are. Good. Most of the casualties inflicted on seafarers, which may not be the most important target. Temple Guard are also starting to pepper them down with their AP arrows. Eventually they're going to move forward, I know it. Eventually they're going to move forward, and it will be in precisely the same fashion as if they did it 10 or so minutes ago. And all of this slow walking around the perimeter of the fort will have been for absolutely nothing. Mark Axeman over here. Again, they've managed to avoid the ire of archers, which surprises me a little bit. I mean, they're getting shot now, I think. No, they're still going after the Medicels, which I guess is fair enough. More Eastmark Axemen moving forward. A lot of the more substantial units are still further away, though. Some Rhudaur Axemen are here. There are some Westmark Marshals close by, I suppose, so it's a good mix of lower end and higher end Rohan units. Again, the Rangers, the artillery, it's not going anywhere. Eventually, the Barbarians are going to have to face up to that and just move in. I think, honestly, they've already... It's never going to be a lightning strike now, anyway. Numenor have had time to get good and comfortable. They've probably had time to survey exactly what is going to be coming at them from both sides, instead of maybe panicking a little bit if all of the units have been committed a little bit more quickly than this. So Numenor will know exactly what's coming. Here we go. Some forces moving in. Eastmark Axemen. They're going to need something more substantial joining them in this assault. Otherwise they're going to fall away very, very quickly against this combined front line from Numenor. So we do have the first clash of infantry as they try to take the fort. Rhudaur Axemen will do slightly better, but of course I would imagine, there they are, the Adunheim Shadow Bows. The thing which probably has the attackers so concerned, but like I said, they ain't going anywhere. They're going to sit there and wait until they have a blob to shoot. With Rhudaur Axemen on the front line, they should do a little bit better. The Barbarian Hordes. They need to attack from the other side as well. It looks as though they're way more reluctant to over here. Maybe because they don't want to commit forward elites while Numenorian steel bows are stood up there. But I'll give credit here to Chris. He's at least moving in. I don't know what they're doing over on this side of things, to be honest with you. They're slowly moving in now, but considering the fast-paced nature of the ambushes, the fact that they slowed to a crawl when they were besieging the fort is somewhat puzzling, but no matter. Here comes some Trollshore axe throwers. I'd imagine they would be the getting the attention of archers. Now they're still going after the Metacells. I mean, standard archers like this aren't going to do all that much damage to Metacell Guard, to be honest with you. Going after the Westmark Marshals is definitely more worthwhile. They're decently armoured and they do have a shield value from wearing that shield on their back, but to be honest with you, like, getting rid of them, way better than sort of pumping regular arrows into the Metacell Guard. Here comes some Trollshore axe throwers, getting a few hits. Yeah, the Rohan, like, they're doing well on the front line here, that's the thing. Like, the Adunheim Shadow Bows could of course turn this fight around pretty quickly. But the Adunheim Shadow Bows can only focus on one choke point, which is why it's so crucial that they attack from over here as well. And now some Eastmark Axemen and some Westmark Infantry are moving forward, which is good to see. They're going to get into melee. And a decision will have to be made here. One, of course, I think the Trebuchet is probably going to go after this choke point, and I would imagine the Rangers are probably going to go after this one. A little bit more densely packed, of course, for those Ranger volleys, which can be so devastating. Meanwhile, Rhudaur Spearmen are going to try and cross the bridge at any rate, but this is where we'll get to see the oh so wonderful Medieval 2 bridge pathfinding in effect, where you have to sort of inch your way onto the bridge and then go across it, otherwise the units will try to avoid using the bridge to the best of their abilities. Eastmark Axemen are there, Westmark Spearmen, they still have to of course worry about the Numenorian steel bows up there. Makeshift battlements from the wooden stakes. In comes another unit, another 2 units actually, of Westmark infantry in various states of repair. Doing decently actually, the Westmarks here. And again, with a lot of numbers on the front line, Numenor could start to panic a little bit because it's a relatively thin defensive line over here, to be honest with you. And still the Rangers aren't looking like firing. Another unit of Rhudaur Axemen moving forward. Again, a lot of these axes. At this point they are starting to be worn down by the quality. But there's plenty more where that came from for the Barbarians. Another unit of heavy axemen being committed to the front line. Should be able to do a decent amount of damage, especially to the Seafarers, but also to the Numenorian cohort. This is what we came here to see. Not slow walking around the fort. Javelins coming in from some Seafarers. They of course are going to be able to do a decent amount of damage here. Those Eastmark Axemen are shaken. They can't afford to rout off though. I mean, they are looking like they might rout off as a result of those javelin volleys, but they can't afford to lose just under 140 men from this assault already. Which again is part of the reason why you need to send a substantial attacking force forward with morale buffing ideally. Numenorian steel bows. Here we see the Numenorians have now advanced forward. Interesting actually, the Rhudaur Spearmen and the Helm's Hammers are over here. They're attacking with armour-piercing arrows, but most of the armour-piercing arrows are actually hitting the Rhudaur Spears, which they'll consider to be a win for them, Rohan, as the Helm's Hammers will really give a good accounting of themselves on the front line against 2 units of decent quality Numenor infantry, though I'm not sure. Might need something a little extra. 32 Attenmore's Troll Hunters is very much a little extra, but we'll see. In comes some more Eastmark Axemen. This is a little bit more like it now. With the assault finally underway, the Barbarians putting some decent pressure on. In come the Adunheim Shadow Bows, are actually firing over here, which I find to be quite interesting. With that, and with the Trebuchet also pointing over here, and there's a large force coming over here, so it's definitely worth the Rangers' time to do so. But with that, I would definitely be trying to commit more if I were Chris over here, because it means that the Trebuchet and the Rangers, the 2 most dangerous tools the defenders have, are not likely to be coming after you. So committing forward something like some Westmark Marshals wouldn't go amiss here, to give some extra bite on the front line. We'll have to wait and see if that turns out to be the case. It could be that the Trebuchet can only use standard shot, which would make things a little bit more interesting over here. In comes some Rhudaur Axemen. You can see a mix of shaken and eager on this front line. I mean, those Rangers, if they shoot over there, they could actually get some friendly fire as well, it's worth saying. So you do need to be a little bit careful. Temple Guard getting into position, I think, to try and go after the Helm's Hammers, and I think they have been successful because there's only 16 of them left. So that's a bit of a shame for the attackers. They've been held in place by good quality units. Alcarondas Legion, I believe they also had several chevrons applied to them. So they're obviously going to be very strong. Stronger than the Numenorian cohort on this occasion, because I think they had maximum chevrons to sort of represent the Praetorian Guard. But to be honest with you, I think the Praetorian Guard would have been just fine being represented by the Royal Legion of Armenelos. I don't really think that the Numenorians needed another highly chevroned unit in their roster on this occasion. But that's by the by. Some Dunman Pikemen moving across. I mean, they're going to be very vulnerable to arrows, but I think the only arrows the Numenorians have left are Rangers and armor-piercing ones, so they'll want to be a little bit more careful than using them on Dunman Pikes. And yeah, you can see obviously the effect of the artillery, the effect of the Rangers starting to have a pretty devastating impact on this front line, as I thought it would. Rhudaur Swordsmen also moving in. More Axemen coming in here. Been cleared out pretty heavily. Is that as a result of routing? Yeah, it is. Some more Dunman Pikemen heading over to this side over here. It's something, I suppose, but they're still not looking like they're going to break through over here. The Barbarians. Westmark Infantry obviously a little bit stronger than the line infantry they had there previously, and the support of some axe throwers. They're going to be able to do a lot of damage, particularly to Belagaya Pikemen. Rohan moving this way. Whatever happened to those Rangers? I'm not sure, to be honest with you. Eastmark Axemen defeat seems certain, so yeah, obviously the attackers are starting to struggle in keeping this assault going, but they were already down on the fort. Like, I never expected the attackers to be able to win this battle for the fort, considering where the battle lay after that second ambush, which is all the more puzzling why they took so long about moving into position, honestly, because fine-tuning what units you're sending in isn't going to make too much of a difference, I don't think, in that kind of situation. Numenorian steel bows firing away, trying to go after the Witch Helm and Slavers, which is definitely the right call. Meanwhile, the pikes over on this bridge, they should be able to hold for quite a decent amount of time, actually, these pikes, even against the fully chevroned Alcarondas Legion. Temple Guard, their work is done. Slapping down the Helm's Hammers. Javelins raining down upon the Barbarians as they try to move in. Balance of power is still relatively even. I mean, there's still some difference makers that could arrive. I mean, here you can see this is a bit of a shame. Look how many throwing axes are being buried into the side of that hill there. So few of them are actually making it through. But this is the nature of a map like this, to be honest with you, for both the attackers and the defenders. A lot of your ammunition can end up just hitting the terrain itself. But it's more of a problem here for the attackers because they need units like that to be doing the business for them at this point. Westmark Infantry getting up close and personal. Getting shot by Numenor Royal Guard. Like, Westmark Infantry are very, very decent line infantry, but they're not up to the same level as Numenorian cohort. And that's going to be the difference here, I think. There's pikes trying to push their way in as well to shore things up. And this assault is going decently well, but again, I feel as though that's more as a result of the Trebuchet and the Rangers not attacking them. You can see the Rangers are out of ammunition, so they committed themselves to melee over here, which no Rangers over here means the attackers do have a little bit more room to breathe, but even with stuff like Rhudaur Berserkers on the front line, like numbers wise, they are looking a little bit down in the dumps. Some depleted steel bows just charging in there as well to help shore things up. Those Temple Guards still have ammunition. I'd imagine their target will be the Rhudaur Berserkers or the Enslavers. Enslavers probably the better of the two to go after because they're just that little bit more dangerous in close melee. Some Eastmark Axemen, some very depleted Eastmark Axemen coming over here. Like, that's not going to be enough to really change this fight around. It's just going to be enough to hold the Alcarondas Legion in place for 30 seconds to a minute longer than they would otherwise be here. Rhudaur Rangers moving in. So they're throwing everything forward at this point to give the attackers their credit. I think there's just going to be a little bit too much left in reserve. Yeah, fully chevroned Alcarondas Legion and some Royal Legion of Armenelos in reserve, as well as Temple Guard, of course, who are nothing to be taken lightly in melee. Let's see here, Rhudaur archers firing away, still throwing axes, attempting to be used. Dunman pikemen getting shot up pretty badly by the Royal Guard, however. Here are the Numenorian steel bows. And several arrows finding their marks, but I mean, against the heavy-plated Numenorians, the amount of damage Rhudaur archers are going to be able to do is going to be very limited, let's be honest. There goes one of the barbarian generals. In the Franadine Berserk unit, that may have been Inarius' general. Or Mr. Sneakman's. Pharazim Swordmasters on the front line. They've taken some decent damage, actually, the Pharazim Swordmasters. They marched a long way down the road, after all, encountering barbarians aplenty. But they're coming to the end now, and you would imagine that at least some of them will still be intact by the end of the day. It's been a very good scenario again. One, I would say that I don't really feel as though the Alcarondas Legion having full chevrons to represent the Praetorian Guard was that necessary, because the Royal Legion of Armenelos can already do that perfectly well as they are. Having the Royal Legion, not the Royal Legion, the Alcarondas Legion in the battle, I don't mind, because I like the fact that they still have their Numenor colours in the game. But again, they don't need full chevrons, not in this situation. But giving the barbarians some credit, they achieved their minor victory conditions, but it looks as though the Romans are going to be able to achieve their major victory conditions. So ultimately, it will be another victory for the armies of civilization. But like I said, I do feel as though Numenor can trade quite well with these factions, especially given the nature of these battles. Like, it's going to be quite difficult. When Numenor dig in, Rohan especially, I think, are going to struggle to dislodge them, because they're going to have to try and find some way around their pikes, which, given the nature of the Naru pikemen, the main way Rohan would deal with that in their shield maidens is already kind of off the table, at least as effective as it would normally be. Rhudaur have a little bit more that they can bring to bear against Numenor, I think, but even so, like, it's very difficult for factions like this, in a scenario like this, to really make headway, given the level of quality on the field as well. But having said that, it's still a very good scenario, and ultimately it will still be relatively close as well. I mean, those ambushes did have the desired effect along the road, which is why the barbarians did manage their minor victory conditions. Some Westmark spearmen now on the front line, as well as some Eastmark axemen. With the help of those pikes, they are actually pushing the Alcarondas Legion back, slowly depleting their number. Franadine pikemen waiting for their chance to come forward. Franadine berserkers moving in from Mevern. There's still some Westmark and Rhudaur units back here as well. This narrower choke point, with Chris sending some of his units around, I assume he's had quite enough over here. He's going to just allow Mevern to take up the slack over here and just engage these units that are still here. Obviously Numenor very able to lock things down on the front line over here and make sure that there's no way through for the barbarian menace. And we're pretty much towards the final 10k frames over here, and it is within 10%. And I imagine it may dip below that as this battle goes along in favour of the Romans, depending on how. I mean, with more limited ammo, and with Temple Guard still having ammo and firing in there. There goes another one of the barbarian generals. Westmark Marshals need to be able to do some decent damage if they're to have more success. Franadine Berserkers throwing their throwing axes in do a decent amount of damage at range and in melee. So maybe it will. I mean, it will be around the 10% mark anyway, which is fair play, I think. Tough for the barbarians throughout, having to deal with the quality of Numenor. But ultimately, Numenor had to willingly go through 2 ambushes, and they came out the other side with enough left in reserve to lock down the fort without being under too much duress here in the late game, I think. Like, I've never thought the barbarians were in danger of overrunning the fort, put it that way. Like, they did decently early on, but as soon as the Rangers and the Trebuchet really started to come into their own, it was always going to be tough. Temple Guard now out of ammunition, but of course, that's a double-edged sword for the attacks, because it means now they're going to have to deal with yet another strong unit in melee. Another heavy swordsman. Not many of those Royal Guardsmen left. In come some more Westmark spearmen. trying to lock things down again. This is another thing, like these spears, they're decent quality as far as their unit type goes, but spear malice, general quality level, they're not going to be what you need to do the damage to Numenor here later on. And there goes a unit of over 100 routing off, which has been a common theme in this battle as well. The barbarians just don't have the discipline that the Romans do. Which makes sense, I suppose. Rhudaur and Rohan won't have the discipline that Numenor would have. In comes another unit of heavy axemen. The Rhudaur pushing their way to the front, trying to help out the Dunman pikemen on the front line. I mean, it will give a bit of AP bite, but unfortunately for them, there's still plenty of Naru and Aru sentinels locking things down, so I don't know how many of those axemen are going to be able to get into close enough range to start swinging those axes around. Some of those arrows are finding the backs of these units on the front line over here. Granadine pikemen. Primarily Westmark units on the front line now, some spearmen, some marshals. How many marshals are actually left? 33? Yeah, that's not going to be enough, is it? Meanwhile, when they are pushing in over here, they may actually find their way deeper into the fort than I thought was going to be initially possible. Alcarondas Legion being forced out the way by a combination of Westmark spearmen, Eastmark axemen and Dunman pikemen. What is this, quicksand? Well, I mean, victory is actually more likely now that they're able to surround the pikes on multiple sides, now that they've pushed over the bridge. Which makes sense, I suppose. Not such a linear engagement for those pikes to take advantage of anymore. We'll keep tabs on that, but I don't think it's going to be all that decisive anyway, to be honest with you. Medicel Guard are now over here. Javelins, some of them finding their marks, which will result in a few more kills. Wonder how long this attack over here is going to keep up for. In come the Witch Realm Enslavers. A relatively even fight over here, to be honest. I mean, all the Numenorians really need to do is just hold the line, and they'll be able to do that. There's another unit of, again, fully chevroned Alcarondas Legion that will come in here. Even if all of this AP is enough to get this force out the way. And again, there's still Naru and Iron Royal Guard up there. Like, there's enough reinforcements here to be getting on with. Some Seafarers, some Royal Legion. It is going to be reasonably close, though. In come the Medicel Guard into melee. 47 of them remain. They're a strong unit in melee. Maybe there won't be any Pharism Swordmasters left at day's end. Maybe they will have to lay down their lives. I mean, Granadine pikemen are on the front line now. I don't think there are any Numenor pikes over here, actually, so that could be a bit of a problem for them. They don't have any ranged units left available to them. I think the barbarians sense that. They're going to move in and they're going to force, I think, some reinforcements to be committed. I mean, the Royal Legion is significant reinforcements, of course. If that trebuchet still has ammunition, of course, things change pretty dramatically, because one shot and all of a sudden the hope that the barbarians have kindled gets smashed into splinters. Dunman pikemen need to keep their discipline as well, because if they rout off all of a sudden, they have nothing against the sentinels to sort of try and meet them pike to pike. It's already a tough fight for them, but sticking in there will allow the Riddermarks and the Witch Realm Enslavers to do their thing. Another unit of Westmark Marshals. There's still the Franadine Berserkers as well. And all of a sudden, you know, all of a sudden, well. Could it be they dumped all of their ranged units too quickly here, Numenor? Alcarondas Legion are going to lose, which means they're going to need to send something over here to deal with this. I mean, one unit of Seafarers probably would have been enough. I think they probably need the Royal Legion of Armenelos to stay down here and help guard against this push now. That could be a fairly significant mistake. Across come the Alcarondas Legion. They're getting in here. Numenor need to hope they can hold on over here, but that's not exactly guaranteed anymore, given the fact that Witch Realm Enslavers are nearby. If these pikes aren't able to hold their position, those Witch Realm Enslavers will do a ton of damage. Okay, yeah, good. Royal Legion of Armenelos coming back, blocking the advance with the Temple Guard. The Alcarondas Legion are going to be able to get in here as well. So this is going to be very close, actually. I may have to eat humble pie here. I thought the barbarians were finished. I thought they were done out here. But they may not be. And the Dunman pikemen, they have actually forced themselves into a position where they can stop the advance of these Seafarers as well. I'd still back the Seafarers being over here to be enough to put an end to this little incursion. Not many spears left. A few axemen. 2 Alcarondas Legion forced up against the cliffs. Facing off against these angry barbarians. Can they do it though? It's all going to come down to staying power here ultimately, which again you would probably back Numenor in those stakes against Rohan and Rhudaur. Look at this, Steel Bowman routing. Again, these are fine margins. Numenor and Royal Guard do still have ammunition, which that could be the difference maker, to be honest with you. If they still have a bit of ammunition shooting into that blob, it could be enough to give them the leg up they need, but they still have a bit of reinforcements they can commit as well. Rhudaur Berserkers, a serious unit, capable of dishing out the damage. And then there's a small matter of this happening over here. The Witch Roman Slavers aren't in melee at this point, but very, very fine margins here. Can the Witch Roman Slavers move in? Can they get into close quarters? I think they need to, otherwise the support in front of them will rout, and then they'll be on their own and lose this fight. So that could actually be a massive misplay there from Mevin as well. Like, it's these margins by which this battle could ultimately be decided. Yeah, it's going to be within 10% this battle, I think. That much is fairly clear. It's over here that the Romans are going to be in trouble. I mean, the Medicel Guard are being overrun a little bit, which will of course mean they now need to commit their reserve force of Rhudaur Berserkers. They don't want to push through with their pikes either. Their pikes need to just sit, use their phalanx to good effect, and again, if they try and push with their pikemen, that will be a dreadful mistake. And once again, it would be from Mevin, so he needs to be very careful with what he's doing there. Because they're not going to win over here. Like, these Dunman pikemen, they've done pretty good to draw off more reinforcements, buy time for the barbarians elsewhere in the fort. But ultimately these seafarers are going to be able to come back. They could even try and cross the bridge and attack from the rear, although I don't know if the Romans will take that risk of... because they will then have to spend quite a lot of time away from the fray in order for that to work out. Yeah, I wouldn't be doing this with the Rhudaur pikemen. That's not a good idea for me. Like, push forward with anything else. Anything else would be better than doing that with the pikemen. You need your pikes to remain in phalanx formation and hold back the Numenorian quality to the best of their ability. Let the Medicel Guard and Rhudaur Berserkers push in through the gap, which they're able to do now. They could wrap up those Royal Guardsmen, I think, over on this side. Ultimately, I think the Royal Legion of Armenelos and the Alcarondas Legion will be victorious over on this side, but they do still have ammo. Marshal of the Guard, with those two shots, he may very well have just crushed barbarian hopes and dreams. That is going to be the only shot he's going to be allowed to get off, though. Those Rhudaur Berserkers are going to rip through that trebuchet crew. Yeah, now again, the Witch Roman Slavers are on the front line, maybe a little bit late, but they do still have pike support. But I think this is more of a footnote of a fight, to be honest with you, because they're just going to grind up against one another. The real battle is going to be decided over yonder. Medicel Guard, they're in behind enemy lines, but they are ultimately being overwhelmed behind enemy lines. There goes a barbarian general. That morale's probably looking a little bit fragile at this point. Rhudaur pikemen moving over here to try and help deal with the Numenor Royal Guard, which they may very well do, but I don't know. I think the way these pikes have been used may very well have just cost the barbarians the game, to be honest with you. If they had sort of stayed on the line, because they could still be holding back this blob over here, supporting what was the Westmark Marshals and a few Westmark and Riddermark units as well. As it was, they didn't do that. Instead, they tried to push through with pikes, which is never going to go well for them with their low stats. They're going to get butchered as they do that. And I think that may very well have been the final nail in the barbarian coffin. They did so well, actually, to fight their way back into contention, the barbarians, but I think some of those judgment calls from Mevin were incorrect. It would have been quite... I don't know, like, maybe the Romans still would have been able to grind out the victory anyway. But the use of the Rhudaur pikemen there certainly didn't help matters, is what I would say. And now what was a brave infantry push is ultimately coming to the end of its tether now. The seafarers returning from their victory up on the high ground, joining up with the Alcarondas Legion and the Royal Legion of Armenelos, and now just some Rhudaur pikemen and berserkers stand between them and wrapping this battle up, to be honest with you. I think now the berserkers see that that's what's going to happen. They're going to try and deal with that force over there, allow the Witch Roman Slavers in, but even that won't be enough at this point. It won't be sufficient, and the Romans will win, but very, very closely run. The major victory, however, I think will be going to the Roman side of things today. Numenor charging in from the rear against the Numenorian cohort. I mean, I don't know if this is going to be enough to finish them off quickly enough. Numenor, if they can do one thing, it's hold out for a decent amount of time, and there's going to be more Numenor units coming over to support them. Seafarers first. Royal Legion are also going to be doing their thing, and I think skirting around the edge of the fort, indeed, Numenor are going to do the same thing and try and sandwich by using the Alcarondas Legion fully chevroned. Here come the Seafarers. And yeah, I mean, the Witch Ram Enslavers, there's 58 of them left, which is a decent amount to be fair. There's probably nothing on the field which has quite the same level of killing power as they do at this point in time, but they're not going to be able to do things all on their lonesome. Granadine Pikemen routing. In come the Royal Legion, which is going to make the lives of the Granadine Berserkers significantly more awkward. They're not going to be loving life at the moment. In comes a partial charge where the first ranks charge in, but the rest of them are just sort of, nah, we'll be there in a minute, we'll catch up, you guys do your thing first. Still a few pikes, a few Dunman pikemen, so it has been a very high quality battle. And there we go, you can see the Alcarondas Legion arriving, and I think with their arrival we will see the final end to the barbarians here. They'll have to content themselves with just a minor victory, while the Romans take home the major victory. 8 Numenorian cohort, 1 Royal Legion. Still those Rhudaur Guard in the back there, so yeah, I mean, all hope is gone really for the barbarians. The best they can do is just sort of kill a few more, just to spit in the eye of their enemies. Yeah, there go the Dunman pikemen routing before the Alcarondas Legion even make contact, and the Enslavers now going to be surrounded by pikes and by high quality infantry. They'll go down swinging, but go down they will. Mevan's army all that remains. Close one though. It's not even, at one point I thought it was going to be beyond 10% the difference, but it's actually 5% now. So it does go to show how well the final fling was for the barbarians. Or how well they did, I should say. There go the Granadine Berserkers, and now they're going to be able to really sandwich in on the main event. The Witch Realm Enslavers. What was it someone said the Witch Realm Enslavers looked like? Was it walnuts? No, I don't think it was. It was like chocolate covered strawberries or something, I think someone said they looked like, with the texture of their armour and their colour scheme. Which is kind of a weird comparison to make, but I can't deny that it's kind of true. And there we go. Mevan going to be the last barbarian standing, if nothing else. His Witch Realm Enslavers fighting back to back, sandwiched between the chevroned up Alcarondas Legion and the Royal Legion of Armenelos. 2 units which they actually probably wouldn't be too bad at fighting in a vacuum with their large AP values, but given the situation, of course, it's not going to go too well for them right now. They could squeeze in with some seafarers as well, but this is all that remains of the Roman force, given that they were just marching through the woods trying to reinforce one of their forts. I imagine they would probably be not too pleased with this turn of events, but local uprisings would probably be quashed at this defeat from the barbarians. I can't imagine they would have yet another army to raise after suffering losses on this scale. Defeat seems certain. Now it's only a distinct possibility. I think they're being a little bit optimistic there, to be honest with you, but still well played by all the players. Obviously it's a scenario, it's sort of designed to go a certain way, albeit I think the final victor was in question. It was always going to be the case of 2 ambushes and then the final siege at the end, but I think a really well designed scenario from Marshal of the Gar. And long may this continue, to be honest with you, because both of his first offerings have been really very good indeed. The maps he's created for them as well have been very nice as well. I think he has made another one confirmed, and given how popular I think they will be, both to play on and for people to just sort of see, hopefully he will grace us with a few more of these. It's not as if we're short on material for historical battles that can be viewed through a Third Age lens.
Let it be a salve upon our wounds.
And there we go. Victory for the Romans, a major victory, but a minor victory for the barbarians given the level of casualties they were able to ultimately inflict in the 2 ambushes through the forest road. Yeah, you can see obviously the kill counts. Not sure which one is which, to be honest with you. Again, the Numenor armies will blend together. It's possible Sin was probably the lowest because he was the one who bore the brunt of most of the damage on 2 of the ambushes, which isn't really anything to say that he played worse than his allies. It's just how it was, I think. You know, that would be my guess. By that logic, you would imagine Lango getting the most kills, but I think it was, I can't remember whose army the Adunheim Shadowbows and I think the Trebuchet was part of Marshal of the Guards. I think the Shadowbows may well have been part of Lango's, which may very well have resulted in him getting the kill count close to 5,000. That would be my guess, anyway. But regardless, as for the barbarian armies, again, mixed fortunes for them, but nothing too out of the ordinary. I mean, you know, they're only separated by around 700 kills, which, given the varied use of their armies, I think is fairly bang on the money. We can actually have a look and see. I mean, Eldacar, he was... I know that Sin had 2 units of Vanguard, and yeah, this was Marshal of the Guard because he had the Faithful, so yeah, it was that way. Basically, the further forward you were, I think, if we have a look down here, Numenor, yeah, Numenor in Vanguard, so yeah, that was how it was. The further forward in the column you were, the more damage you took, and ultimately the fewer kills you were able to get as a result, but obviously that's just how the chips fell. It doesn't really have to do with how well or poorly a player played in the end, I don't think. Lots of units breaking 100 and 200 kills. The odd unit breaking 300 kills as well for Marshal of the Guard with a couple of units of Numenorian cohort. As for Sin, he didn't have any units break 300, but he had several break 200. He actually had the Shadowbows, interestingly enough, as part of his army, and they nearly broke 300. Maybe not the ideal terrain for them to be utilising their ammunition, but still, very, very nice. Temple Execution is doing quite well. And then down here we have Lango's army, several units breaking 300, and actually one breaking 500, a unit of Numenorian Shield Guard, heavy AP spears breaking 500 kills. Very impressive. The Pharazim Nobles getting over 400 as well, so they were doing some heavy lifting under cover of those trees to help stave off those ambushes, which that's fairly telling, to be honest with you, because the ambushes could have gone far better, I think, had it not been for the good use of the cavalry. The Vanguard struggled a little bit more because they ran into some spears, but definitely some fine use of the Alcarondas Faithful, but especially of the Pharazim Nobles from Lango. Numenorian cohort getting nearly 400 kills as well, so yeah, some good performances all around there. And I do think ultimately the Romans did very well. They weathered the ambushes quite well, even if they did succumb to the minor victory conditions for the Barbarian Alliance. But they were able to wall up in the fort pretty well, and they actually dealt with that late attacking rally pretty well. They always had that extra ammunition in the back pocket if they needed it, and I think ultimately the 2 hits from that trebuchet were what ultimately put this beyond the Barbarians in the end, crushing their hopes, as I said. But yeah, big thank you to Marshal of the Guard for sending this to me, and I would be all too happy to showcase and even play actually in some of these in the future. I have actually been asked to play in both of these, but at the time I had other commitments. So hopefully next time, or at least one of these times when one of these comes out, I can actually play in them, because they do seem very fun to be a part of indeed. They're certainly very fun to show, if nothing else. And I hope that you as the audience do concur. As for what's coming up in the future, I do have a Silmarillion scenario that I'm going to do as well, which that is another historical battle, albeit a historical battle within the lore of Middle-earth rather than the history of real life. So we'll be taking a look at that. I've got a few more slightly, some more pitch battles in Reforged, as well as, of course, that the battle I keep mentioning as well, a Moria siege. But as long as these newer scenarios come in, and in both Silmarillion and in Third Age, I will of course keep pushing Moria back. It's always going to be in the back pocket as one that I'm going to do, but I always want to show off new things over things we've seen before. So don't worry, the person who sent me the Moria replay, it will be shown eventually. and I would imagine in the next week and a half, you can probably expect to see it. But yeah, if there's another one of these, of course, it will be kicked. The can will be kicked further down the road, as I said. Also, as regards to streaming, this weekend has been a little bit. Well, there's been some things going on this weekend, so I am recording this on the Sunday. But yeah, there was no stream this week because of certain things. But again, streaming is meant to be one of those things that I can do a little bit more off the cuff, have a little bit more freedom with, just sort of mixed into my regular schedule, as it were. So maybe next weekend we can do another stream, possibly in one of Eclipse's games, although streaming Third Age online, given my internet, like I said, I don't really have the ideal setup for streaming, to be honest with you, especially given the somewhat fragile nature of both Reforged and Med 2 in big games, given Eclipse's run of luck in recent scenarios as well. So we might do that. We'll at least give it a try at some stage, but if not, of course, there's always the spectre of a Divide and Conquer campaign looming as well. So that's a few things that you can expect to see in the coming days and weeks. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and hope you will join me for whatever is next.